What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Attack with me, Peter Santamaria. I'm so stoked because I freaking love toys. Look at these things. What? I have these all over my office, and they make my day way better when I just stop and take a look at some of the cool things we have around the office here in the studio. One of my favorite shows of all time is The Toys That Made Us. The guy behind that show is named Brian Volk-Weiss. Brian Volk-Weiss is the creator of shows like The Toys That Made Us, The Movies That Made Us. He's got a show right now on Netflix called Down to Earth with Zac Efron, a show called A Toy Store Near You. It's on Prime and YouTube. The guy's brilliant. He makes a ton of great stuff. And what's amazing is through a few amazing contacts, shout out Brian, I got a chance to interview him for the show, and that's really unusual because the show's not that big yet, not that cool yet, barely anybody wants to be on it right now. But the point is, we have an opportunity to hear the mind of a great creator, and that's what I love. I love getting to know these people. I love getting to know how they think and how they got to where they are from where they were, and maybe we can get some tidbits out there to help us along our path. That's the whole point of Attack, right? Figure out how to get better at what we're doing, hustle, grind, and grow in our own fields. All right, guys, check it out. First of all, tell people what you do if they don't know you. Brian Volk-Weiss, what you do and why people know you.
My name's Brian Volk-Weiss. I've done a bunch of stuff, but I guess of relevance, depending on the audience. I've produced and directed a lot of stand-up specials. That was my first real thing that I guess anybody might care about. And then the other thing was I created a show called The Toys That Made Us, and that changed my company, my career, my life, and all that stuff. So, and then, some other random stuff in the middle.
Well, so the first thing I wanted to ask you, because I'm just trying to think where my mind goes, is you're like really good on camera. Why aren't you in front of the camera for anything that you do?
Well, it's funny. If you had asked that a month ago, I don't know what I would have said. Well, I know what I would have said. I would have said that I would have made a joke that would have been like a passive-aggressive but actually accurate comment, the gist of which is, I'm not George Clooney or Brad Pitt. Who wants to look at me? And I would have meant it. But for a variety of reasons, entirely due to COVID, I am on camera for for the first time ever, for our newest show, which is A Toy Store Near You. So I do the intros for that show. And the reason is we made the show and it needed something to make it a series and not just a random group of things. So we were in COVID. This was like 2 months ago. And I was like, you know what? I have access to myself. We're self-distributing this. Who cares? So I did it. And I'll be very honest with you. I do not like doing it. And all you have to do is talk to my head of post, and she would tell you, it's like pulling teeth to get me to do them. And that's how I know I don't like doing it. And I know also about myself, at some point, because I don't like doing it, I will stop doing it and probably never do it again. But right now, while we're still all working from home, I'm doing them.
Well, it's interesting because you're pretty engaging on cameras, even on those two 2 or 3 episodes have come out now. I think it's just 2 so far.
2 have come out. The third one, knock on wood, comes out next week on the 30th.
So when I saw that Toy Store Near You was coming out, so that's a show on YouTube people can watch now if they haven't seen it. And
Amazon Prime.
Oh.
Most people are actually watching it on Prime.
Oh, okay, interesting. So on Amazon Prime as well. That show, kind of like fits into what you've done before with Toys That Made Us, but it's a totally different aspect because whereas in Toys That Made Us, you're looking at the human stories behind these toys, I think it's fair to say. And this is kind of like the human aspect of the toy shops that it's fascinating because there aren't that many in Miami where I'm from. South Florida, we have Tate's Comics, which is huge. But other than that, there's not a lot of places where you can get toys like that. And I'm wondering if when you came up with the idea to do this, was this totally inspired by being by COVID, or were you planning on doing this anyway? And just the way you produced it changed with COVID? And is there anything that went through your head like, oh, well, I did The Toys That Made Us, I'm going to do another show about toys? Is that something that you want to keep being part of your legacy, like the toy guy?
So the short answer is we did the show 1,000% because of COVID.
Okay.
I mean, like 1,000,000,000% because of COVID. And the way I can prove it to you is go back a couple years and look for interviews. Obviously, don't do this. I'll save you some time. But I repeatedly was asked to make a show like this, and I repeatedly said I had no interest in making a show like this. And the reason for that was very simple. As a director, and this is my own philosophy, it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean if 100 people hear what I'm saying, 99 may not agree with me. But my philosophy is this. There are things in life that are like really awesome and exciting in real life that are really boring on a television set in your bedroom or living room. So my best example, magic. Magic, when you're in the theater, is very exciting. But when you're in your bedroom and you have the TV that you saw Jurassic Park on, and you know goddamn well there's no dinosaurs, but there they are, how is magic? I mean, like, when you're in the theater, it's like, oh my God, how did he get doves out of his wrist? But then on TV, it's like, well, they could have CGI'd the doves. So another example, more connected to the shows, is a toy collection is the greatest thing in the world when you're standing in the room, especially if you can touch it and hold it. And I don't mean to get cheesy, but smell it. That's an amazing thing. Seeing a collection on TV, in my opinion, is really, really boring. And I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but that's how I feel. So, and as I get to produce the shows that I make, I'm kind of a dictator of what I want to do. So what changed was COVID. And what happened was I was talking to Kyle, who owns Black Cat Comics in Burbank. And this was about 2 weeks before the quarantine. And I was like, hey, dude, they're talking about a quarantine. What happens if there's a quarantine? And Kyle is like this like really smart, but like very kind of laid back dude. And Kyle was like, well, I guess it would mean 80% of my income goes away or more, but my costs stay the same. And I was like, oh, that sounds bad. Then 2 weeks later, the quarantine happened. And it was so random. My wife, for the first time ever, and hasn't done this since, was watching a show in our bedroom about some noodle maker in Japan who like made fancy noodles, and he had shot it with his phone. So that got me thinking, how do I make money and get more exposure for the toy stores to help them deal with COVID? So the next morning, I called my buddy Billy Galaxy, who owns one of my favorite vintage toy stores in the world in Portland, Oregon. And I was like, hey, I don't even know if we can do this yet. I have not talked to my head of production or my head of post, but let's say they say we can. If I sent you a list of 10 questions and a list of like 10 things to film, could you like shoot all that on your phone and send it to me, and then we'll make a TV show? And he immediately said yes. Then I asked my production and post team. They said we could do it under a lot of rules. Not rules, but you know what I mean, a lot of standards or whatever. And then I told Billy, let's do it. Billy got us all the footage we needed in about 48 hours. We cut it into an episode. That was horrible because I had given Billy bad instructions. So learning from what I had done wrong, we gave him so Billy was kind of our guinea pig. So I gave Billy 10 more things to do, which include, by the way, the first pilot, no customers, no employees. It was literally Billy for half an hour talking about the store, and it was a list of 10 toys. So we then had him shoot the employees and the customers, and then we got some Portland stuff too. And then once we had that prototype, then we expanded that to the rest of the stores. And right now we have 5 episodes, some degree of lock. 2 have aired, and 3 of them are in some degree of locking. No, 3 of them have locked. Joseph Hand's episode Lesher Toys, and there's 80 words to his name, so I'm not even going to say it. But he has a toy store in Lesher, England, which is spelled, it looks like Leicester, but it's said Lesher. Yeah, so that episode is hopefully coming out next week. And then we have 2 episodes that are pretty close to locking. Spiral Toys, which is in Tokyo, and Cherry Bomb, which is in Victoria, Canada.
So that's, part of what I wanted to bring up is because now that we're all doing things out of need. In fact, I don't think anybody would have agreed to come on a show with me who nobody knows unless they were stuck at home. And I pulled a few favors. But the idea is now that you're working at reactionary in a sense, do you think that this is going to set a trend for other companies that normally spend bigger budgets on production and say, look, we can spend more money on X, Y, and Z project, but we can gamble and roll the dice a little bit on other projects if we follow this model? Do you think like being nimble is going to stay the name of the game even after we come out of quarantine?
So 2 things. One is I would have absolutely done your show without COVID. It is my first of all, I've only been doing press for about 3 years. I am still shocked anybody gives a shit about what we're doing. Am I allowed to curse, by the way? Yeah,
totally, dude. Well, you're a hustler, dude. You're a grinder, and I want to talk about that little by little. Right. And that's what I've tried to feature on this show is people who I find interesting and I want to talk to, whether anybody listens, but more important, people who kind of embody this idea of attack, which is what the show is called, figuring out a road and making a road when there is no road. And I feel like your career that I've been able to read about is 100% that. So that's why it's so important.
I heard a great quote once. It was on an advertisement for a really stupid TV show about 20 years ago that didn't even make it through its first season. But the quote was, "The only way out is through." And I don't know if they invented that quote or not. I swear I've heard that elsewhere.
It's a Churchill quote, but too, like that.
It sounds very Churchillian. But that is definitely, if you look at my career, you have analyzed it correctly. I mean, I grind it out. I mean, I have some luck, of course. You need luck. But when you're a grinder, statistically speaking, as long as you don't give up, you're going to have luck because it balances out. You're going to have bad luck and good luck. And all you got to do is have the good luck exceed the bad luck. And that takes a while, by the way. I mean, I'm entering, I think, the 22nd year of my career. Yeah, on July 1st. And I would argue, I mean, I had some degree of horrible luck for the first 10 years, but that bad luck never killed me. And every tiny piece of good luck allowed me to get slightly more ahead. So that's, you nailed it. I don't even consider myself a hustler because I believe that term implies some sort of skill. I am a grinder in that I wake up every morning and I just fucking get in the trench.
And do you think that you get to a point, or do you feel like you ever gotten to a point that you can go, okay, I can just focus on the craft now because I feel like I've made enough inroads where I'm going to stay afloat if I at least keep up this pace? Not saying that you get complacent, but that you kind of like have a different type of anxiety now, which is like, are people going to react well versus, I mean, and I'm assuming that you even have anxiety. Like for me, that's the thing, like getting to the point where I am now, which I work full time for an entertainment company where I was a teacher for 13 years in the public schools and kids of all ages and doing my artwork on the side. I wake up at 4:30 every morning, get to my classroom at 5:30, work for 2 hours before the kids even get there. And so now I get to just do it at a normal pace. I feel a little guilty about it sometimes, like survivor's guilt of some kind, and I wonder if you, as long as you've been doing it, get to a point ever, or have you gotten there where you're like, okay, I've carved a niche. Now let's start, seeing what happens. Does that even exist, or is that a fantasy?
First of all, I just want to say I hope to end my career the way you started yours. I want to be a teacher.
Oh, kill it.
Good for you that you did that.
Kill it.
My guilt that I have guilt that I didn't serve in the military, and I have guilt that I haven't been a teacher. I'm too old and fucked up to be in the military, but I can still teach.
Well, a lot of my students watched your shows between classes, so they're paying attention.
Oh, that's probably the best quote. That's probably my favorite thing I've ever heard about the show, man. So thank you. But I mean, I've been reading about success and failure my whole life. In fact, to be honest with you, I am moderately interested in the topic of success and obsessed with the topic of failure. I have been reading about people failing, companies failing my entire life. And I feel like I've learned a lot about what not to do if anybody perceives what I've done to be successful. So I do not have anxiety about, like, if I'm perceived to be at 10 feet, I have no fear of going down to 9 feet or 4 feet. Zero. My fear is letting down people that trust my name or my company's name for making a product that they enjoy. But the truth of the matter is that fear doesn't paralyze me, because Kubrick made a shitty movie.
Right.
Like, Lamborghini made a bad Lamborghini. Like, who am I? It is such megalomania for anybody, for any artist, any engineer, anybody, to think that they can't fuck up. So I'm at peace that I'll fuck up. I'm at peace that if I'm at 10 feet, I might get to 12 feet. I'm definitely going back to 4 feet. Like, and that's okay. That's a career. So, like, you just have to understand the path that other people have taken. And, like, I'll be honest with you, I'll tell you something right now. I haven't said this publicly yet, but, like, I don't think I fucked up with the first episode of A Toy Store Near You. I'm very proud that we dove into COVID as deep as we did. And I have no regret. By the way, there are a couple things in toys that made us right now. I'll tell you, I regret. I regret the reenactment we did for the G.I. Joe episode. I am mad at myself that we didn't pick something else. But just to give you proof that I'll be open about when I view myself as fucking up. But on A Toy Store Near You, with that first episode, I stand by it. I know why I made the decisions I made, and I think I made the right decisions in my mind. We got a lot of negative feedback saying that, especially while everybody's still stuck inside, that, you know, we were too much about the COVID, not enough about the toys. And a lot of people, and by the way, if you look at the comments section on YouTube, it's literally just to show you how fucked up the human mind is, or at least mine is. This negativity is, in the comments, about 4%.
Right.
96% positive.
Yeah.
3 to 4% negative.
Why do we focus on that? I'm someone who's obsessed with that too. Like, I had an issue shipping out prints. I did a Mondo release for Godzilla prints recently. Are you familiar with Mondo posters?
Very,
okay.
Very. I had the Star Trek 2 one and the RoboCop one.
Sick.
Right over there.
Heck yeah. Okay, so I got to do 3 Toho licensed Godzilla prints, which is my dream. I could die tomorrow. I'm good. And so I was shipping out the APs, and some of them got damaged in the shipping. I sent out 150 tubes I sent out. Like 5 of them got crushed, or 10 of them got whatever, or somebody jacked the cap off, pulled the stuff out, put it back in. And it's all I can think about. Like, I feel like I've let, it's all I can think about. Why is that the way it is?
Well, Toys That Made Us season 1, we got over 500 like real reviews, not comments. One bad one. What?
What did it say?
I know the guy's name. I don't know the name of any of the people who liked it. That's not true, but you know what I mean. Yeah, it's human nature, man. It's human nature. But the point I'm making on Toy Store Near You, I listen. I respect the criticism, and episode 2 was almost completely locked, but I did a tiny, tiny, tiny COVID trim. And then episode 3, which is Joseph Hand, which comes out next week, that episode we did a medium COVID trim. And now the next 2 episodes that are coming out, I've definitely toned back to COVID. Because there's some criticism where you're like, fuck you, you're an idiot. But there's some criticism where you're like, you know what, I don't agree with you, but I hear what you're saying. and you're not the only one saying it. And then you got to ask yourself as an artist, can I listen to the criticism without changing the reason I did this in the first place? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then there's nothing I can do. If the answer is yes, I think it's important to be malleable and take into, that's the beauty of our world now, where I can get feedback from episode 1 and have it affect episodes 3 through 50. And I feel like I'm an idiot or a jerk not to listen and do that.
Yeah, when I first sat down to watch episode 1 with my wife, we were both like, whoa, this is not what we thought it was going to be, 100%, because I didn't expect any of that to be in the episode. Frankly, because I didn't even realize that it was being filmed during this time, so it caught me off guard anyway. But when we were watching it and going through it, I started to remember feelings that I have about like toys to me are super important. That's what I correct myself. I can't die yet. I need to make a toy first, then I can die. And so they're so important to me. And I was talking, I don't know if you know James Groman, but so he's a sculptor. He worked on Madballs and My Pet Monster and Barnyard Commandos. Now he's famous for doing these big designer vinyls like this King Corpse, like a zombified King Kong, or Rotten Rex, Kaiju Killer.
Okay.
Well, if you see his stuff, you'll love it. It's like people come from China to get in line to buy a raffle ticket to spend like $1,500 on one figure. Wow. It's insane. You gotta see it. And they cry if they don't win the raffle. Anyway, I was talking to him about it because he's been a toy designer forever, working at Hasbro, and we talked about how toys, at least for me, they're like these charged totems. And my office is, full of toys, a lot of Godzilla and Kaiju stuff, because they make me want to make stuff. Like when I look at them, I go, ooh, man, look at all the work that went into this. I got to draw this, or I got to draw. It gives me like a caffeine shot. And then when I'm watching episode 1 of Toy Store Near You, I'm like, you know what? This is pretty awesome, whether it was intentional or not, because it continues to put toys in a world or in a mindset that this is part of a lot of people's important aspects of their life. And for a lot of people, there is a reality where COVID is happening and toys are happening, and it's not linked. Like for a lot of us, I'm turning on your show. I'm like, oh, I want to chill out and listen to toys and stuff about toys for half an hour. And when I see that, what actually came up in the episode, I'm like, you know what, dude? It's kind of awesome that these guys exist and are grinding and struggling now, because when we come out of this, they're going to be the reason I can go in and have like a mini museum experience, which is what I feel like when I go to an old toy store like that. And because they're curating, they're kind of like keeping everything, I don't know, the same way you would be grateful for a museum docent, and so I liked that aspect of it, and I thought it was different and fresh, and I liked it in the sense that it was uncomfortable and it was challenging. But who the hell thinks that you're going to get that watching a toy show? And you already have Toys That Made Us, which is a different vibe. And it's kind of cool because it separates the two because of that. I thought so.
Yeah. And I mean, to what we were talking about earlier, I feel like anybody could have made a show just about toys and a toy store. And again, that was also part of why I had no interest in it. It was seeing this aspect of the store that, I mean, to be honest with you, man, it's like I don't want to do anything that doesn't have a chance to make people laugh and cry. Like, I don't want to make something that just makes people laugh. I don't want to make something that just makes them cry. I want to have both. And I may fail, but at least I want to try. And to do an episode just about toy stores and toys, nobody's going to be tearing up. But when you see Luce crying I was sitting there watching that in a rough cut at 6 a.m, fucking bawling my eyes out. And that's how I wanted to make.
Yeah, and I think it humanizes this culture sometimes. I live to go to conventions. Like, that's my favorite thing. And part of why I work in this field, I was doing gallery shows before this, but the reason I wanted to get into pop culture is I wanted to have a reason to go to cons and have a reason to talk to people at cons like yourself, or, I got to, meet Mike Mignola or Frank Miller or whoever it is. I want to just have a reason to be there, not only as a fan, but like so we can talk shop. And a lot of the people that you meet at a big convention, they're characters, and sometimes I think to somebody who just comes for the day, it's like a cartoon or a caricature of what a real person is. So Toy Store near you, I think, delves a little deeper into the full spectrum of some of these people. Now, getting to talking about tearjerkers, I wanted to say the most loving fuck you, man, for making me cry so hard in that TMNT episode of Toys That Made Us. What the fuck, man? I watched that. Turtles started everything for me. Like, and I love Eastman and Laird, and I can't think of a part of my life that doesn't have Ninja Turtles in it. And I got to meet Kevin Eastman one time at a con. What a nice guy. And then when I started watching this episode, I'm like, wow, this is crazy, dude. Because now you get to a point where you see some of your heroes age and they start to look like your grandparents. And then it kind of like, for me, I start to think of them in that loving way. Like, oh, you're just somebody's grandpa or someone's grandma or someone's uncle. And that gets weird because they now are all of a sudden human in a vulnerable sense. And then seeing that, it was warm, it was loving, it was incredible. But my question was that an intention of the episode from the beginning to get them together, or did that kind of evolve as the production went on?
So, dude, it was crazy. And I want to say something first because Mr. Eastman has created some controversy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I never fail. I always want to address it head on. The episode, nor any of the press, nor any interviews I've done, have said we were the first to reunite them. We're not. They reunited about 2 years earlier at a convention. So I just want to say that out loud. Eastman is saying a lot of bullshit that is, first of all, not true about the making of the episode, A. But B, nobody has ever claimed that we were the first to reunite them. What we did claim was that we were the first to get them working together again on Teenage. So let me just get that off my chest. Okay, here's the answer to your question. We are in, what's the name of the town Mirage is in? New Hampshire.
It's New England,
yeah. So we're doing the interview, and if you watch the episode, you can't tell this. That room that we're in interviewing Peter, that room is like 6 feet by like 3.5 feet. It is, and the reason I chose it, because we were in this gigantic building. We could have filmed anywhere, but the reason I chose it was the walls were covered with all the turtles. So it's just me and the sound. Normally we would have 5 or 6 people in a room like that, it was me. No, sorry. It was me and the DP and Peter. Like, we couldn't have sound. We couldn't have anybody. We were in there for about 5 hours and 15 minutes. If you look at Peter carefully, even though we tried to color correct this out, he is covered in sweat. I mean, we are fucking roasting our balls off. About 5 hours and 15 minutes into the interview, he's like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and when I did the deal with Viacom, I did carve out that I could keep the rights to make 14 issues a year, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, dude, and like I said, this is 5 hours and 15 minutes into it must have been 90 to 100 degrees in the room. And I'm like, Peter, have you ever said that before publicly? And he's like, I don't think so. We finished the interview. I'm like, Peter, if we could get Kevin to come here, would you be cool with it? And long story short, he said yes. We called Kevin. We were very clear with Kevin. We paid for his plane ticket. We paid for his wife. We paid for a hotel and literally flew them across the country based on that nugget of knowledge from that interview. I did an interview yesterday with like an 88-year-old woman that used to work at Orion for Movies That Made Us. And literally 3.5 hours. And she gave us one of the greatest Verhoeven nuggets at like 3 hours, 10 minutes. And I like turtles. Turtles are great. But I am I got 8 fucking PhDs in RoboCop, dude. Oh, yeah. And she said something about Verhoeven at 3 hours and 5 minutes. So that's why you have to do these long interviews. And that's how we found that knowledge. And like I said, and by the way, we had already interviewed him. We had interviewed him like 3 months earlier in San Diego, I think.
Verhoeven, you're saying?
Kevin.
Oh, Kevin. Yeah.
No, Kevin Eastman, sorry. And we flew him, like I said, we called him up, we flew him out. And the best part of the story is that whole scene of them coming together and hugging and writing the comic book again, dude, we filmed for like 90 minutes tops, maybe an hour. And then it was over. So, like, I just needed that shot. So, like, it was that simple. But we needed Kevin to get on an airplane. And he insisted on bringing his wife, which, of course, I get it. We're happy to do.
Yeah, I don't even think that matters, because what matters for someone like me is what I experienced, and it's not painting something that it's not true. They are working together. They are hanging out together. And to be fair, as far as I knew, and maybe I'm not like on, Newsarama every day, but I didn't know that they were cool again and they were back together again. So you have a platform to kind of like explain that.
They're not like, they're kind of cool.
Yeah, I get it.
But like, they did an appearance 2 years earlier, and they hadn't seen or talked really. Maybe they talked. I don't know. But they hadn't. So basically, since they broke up with our episode and that convention, to the best of my knowledge, they've only been together twice. And I don't know what you're like with your friends, but for me, with my friends, I tend to see them more than twice every decade.
Yeah.
But what do I know?
Yeah, I loved it. And I guess more importantly is what the moment kind of conjured up, which was this feeling of, man, a whole life. It's like a whole life, because all we think about is this tiny microscopic part of what their life is, which is they created a comic and it went boom, right? And so like really what my connection to Turtles is might have very little to do with Eastman and Laird, but I've always known their name because they always had their name on the top of everything. And it's just that. It's just like if we could have, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but imagine if we could have seen Stan and Jack have a conversation at some point. And even if it's not to that same level, there's something on film or tape now on video that has that moment that to me is really important. I love that stuff. Look, I watch ESPN my whole life, and I know I love the stories behind sports more than the games themselves, but I feel that way, if not stronger, about all the people in this industry of comics and toys and cartoons and films. Like, I love that stuff. And I love shows that come out that kind of treat it with the same kind of gravitas that 30 for 30 gives on ESPN.
That's what we try.
That's awesome. And it's something that I've always wanted to do. I feel like there's space for more of that. And because my generation's age now is of the demographic where we're going to sit and pick stuff. And I am going to watch the Jordan documentary, and I am going to watch Toy Store Near You in the same sitting. I'm not so rare either.
But I'll tell you this. I'm not into any sport. Yeah. I have zero interest. I cannot stand. I like going to like a basketball game every now and then or whatever. I find baseball and football more boring than anything ever. I love sports movies. I have seen every episode of 30 for 30. Like,
how good is it?
I'm obsessed. I am obsessed with the Belichick, with Parcells of it all, and like. I don't know anything about sports. I've probably seen less than 20 real games of sports in my life, but I could tell you about Belichick and Parcells. So I get it. And I'm not even into sports. It's the story of these human beings and what they go through with their successes and failures, like I was saying earlier.
And it's how it's captured and produced too, because I've seen the same stuff covered differently. There's other Masters of the Universe documentaries even on Amazon Prime, and they're good and they have some stuff, but there's something about the cadence and the production quality and the delivery and the rate of information that comes through in Toys on Netflix that I thought was like, ooh, this is going to be shown for a long time. And I've heard you talk about, or I forgot who I spoke to. I think I've heard you talk about this on interviews, that it's not a cheap show to make. Or not an easy show to make. Toys, is that the truth?
That is the truth.
Why is that? Because I see that show, and I don't know anything, but I like to think I know everything. And I watch a show like that, and I watch a show like Ugly Delicious by Chef David Chang on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it. It's fantastic. And I go, I'm going to do a show like this. And I pitched this idea I had, which I think is brilliant. I'll tell you off recording because I think it's too good. I don't want to blurb it out there. But I think it's a really good idea, and it's organic. And when I pitched it to some people who have some pull, they go, well, that's going to be expensive. I'm like, why? So please explain to me what makes a show that looks nimble in the sense that it's people and it's assets. Why is that expensive to an idiot like me who doesn't know anything?
I could answer this for half an hour, but I can give you two answers that'll make you immediately. By the way, what is that like gin?
Bourbon.
Like, what do you drink? Is that bourbon?
It's bourbon. And by the way, feel free if you have bourbon there or anything if you want to drink on camera.
It's barely noon here in LA.
It's 3 p.m.
Here, I love that you're drinking during the interview. If it were later, I would be too. So, two things. One, every interview that you see in an episode, let's say you hit play and it's the G.I. Joe episode, and you sit there with a piece of paper and a pen, and you count how many people we interviewed. And let's say, I'm making this number up. Let's say it comes out to 11. Well, let me tell you about these 11 people. A, you're not seeing the 30 fucking people we interviewed.
Okay.
So there's 20. I'm bad at math. What's 11 minus 30?
Yeah, exactly.
19.
Yeah.
So there are 19 people that didn't make it into the show. That's why those 11 are all A+. We interview 30 people. 10 of them are going to be boring and suck. That's just the truth. 10 of them are going to be awesome. And then the middle 10 will be somewhere in the middle. So that's the first thing about that. The second thing about that, you may find is shocking, they don't all live in the same city. In fact, a lot of them don't live in the same country. So we got to go to Japan. We got to go to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. By the way, half the people from Hasbro that have retired, they have moved to Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Montreal, Florida. So when we get a season greenlit, we spend, and this is the other thing, the research phase. We do 4 months, and this is about 8 people researching and pre-interviewing. So we've got 8 people on payroll for 4 months before we shoot a frame, interviewing and interviewing and finding the people. So when I sit down to interview someone, we've already interviewed them twice, once over the phone and once in a recorded Skype. And then we've interviewed everybody. So we know person A is going to say this, but we also know person B said that, and there might be conflict. So I'll be able to say, well, you just said that, buddy, but we spoke to your office mate 49 years ago, and she said, and that's how we get that good stuff. And that is not cheap. So that's Exhibit A. Exhibit B, there are a lot of lawyers involved. A lot. So when we lock an episode, and by the way, we do this with a toy store near you. We do this with a lot of stuff we do. We send the episode to law firm number 1. Law firm number 1 takes about a month. And that's a bunch of lawyers working for a month. They send us a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet breaks down the entire episode shot by shot into a spreadsheet that's every square is either red, yellow, or green. So we get that, and all we do, we don't give a shit about the green. We look at the yellow. Okay, how do we, and the law firm says to us, okay, you know that clip? You know how you use 9 seconds? If it's 6 seconds, you could use it. And then we get to decide, oh, should we do it or not? The red, that we just have to get rid of it. But the problem with that, then we got to put something else there. And that all takes time.
Okay.
Then we send it back to law firm 1, and we go back and forth until it's all green. Then it goes to law firm 2.
Oh, wow.
Law firm 2 validates law firm 1, and it's never the first time. Law firm 2 says 99% of this is cool except this. Then we got to deal with that. Then it goes to Netflix legal, and then Netflix legal, sometimes for legal reasons, sometimes for other reasons, says don't do that.
Okay. So, and then that would a deal be based more on like people's stories and like potential libel or stuff like that, or
that's a part of it. But as you know, our show uses a lot of footage.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
And
Okay.
very, very, very specific laws based on 100 years of precedent as it relates to fair use on what you can do and not do.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it's that's why we have to basically have 3 rounds of legal.
Okay, that makes more sense. So, so man, that makes a lot more sense when you were going online and telling people like we're making the next season, chill out, we're bringing it to you. That's probably a lot of.
Well, but also a part of that is Netflix needs time to analyze the data to decide if we're getting greenlit or not. So between season 2 premiering and season 3 getting greenlit, I think was about 4 months.
Was this something that you had an idea of going into it, like saying I want to make a documentary show about toys and the stories behind the production, the success and failure of these toys? Was that something that you had an idea going in, like, oh shit, this is gonna be a lot, or is that something that you had experience with?
Oh, I had no experience with it except because everything I did up until Toys That Made Us was comedy. Dude, it took me 7 years to sell Toys That Made Us.
Shit.
So, yeah. So, but I have been since high school obsessed with documentaries. So, by the time it got greenlit, I knew exactly the kind of documentary that I wanted to make. And one of the key things that I believe, and of course I could be wrong because I haven't interviewed everybody, but one of the reasons I think the show is so successful is, yes, we have moments of pathos where people cry, but I didn't treat toys like a documentary about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. And if you look at a lot of the documentaries made before ours, that's really the problem with them. Like you'll be seeing a documentary about a toy and they're trying to treat it like it's, it's a film about the Holocaust or something. The Holocaust, but you know what I'm saying?
Overly
like
serious.
Yeah. So I have a comedy background. So all the editors that I hired were comedy editors that I had worked with for a long time. And very early on, they were like, "Hey, should we tone down the comedy?" And I'm like, "No."
How did you?
And
how did you get that comedy background? Were you doing stand up in New York ever?
No,
Never. And so I read about your career, and I saw, wow, I had no idea that you were producing. I mean, like you've literally produced the majority of all comedy specials I've seen in the last 10 years, something like that. It's insane. And how do you? First of all, how do you get to that point where you're producing comedy? Is that something that you just had a passion for, and why are people, why are you known and sought after for that? Like what makes you the guy to go to for stuff like that?
So first of all, I had zero interest in stand-up comedy. I mean, not
performing it.
Not only that,
performing it, you mean?
No,
at all.
Not only that, I didn't even like comedies. Like when I met my wife, like I would show her, Dune. Yeah. She would show me Waterboy.
Okay.
Like I never watched comedies. I was all science fiction, drama, thriller. By the most random of shit ever, I was broke in LA and I was interning, and a guy on the same floor as me who I met in the copy room, he was quitting, and all I knew, and I mean, dude, I am not, this is literally a fact. I'm not trying to be humble or joke. This is a fact. All I knew, his boss was paying him $50 a day cash, and I didn't know how I was going to make rent. So I interviewed with his boss. I got the job. And then it was like, what do you do? And he was a manager of comedians. All he did was manage comedians. So I got that job. I tell you right now, it was March 15th, 1999. And that Saturday, which I guess was 5 days later, I went to the Laugh Factory. Other than going to a friend of mine's Sweet 16 that had been at Stand Up New York in Manhattan, I had never been to a comedy club in my life. I'd never seen a comedy special, a stand-up special in my life. And I went to the Laugh Factory. I was going to go for one show. I stayed for all three, literally watched 3 shows. I was there for like 9 hours practically, and I fell in love with it. Then I became a manager of comedians. And when you're a manager of comedians, between 0 and 3 times a year, you produce stand-up specials for your client. And then I was like, I don't want to be a manager anymore. But I do like producing. So I just started making stand-up specials for non-clients. Then I retired as a manager. One year we did 3. As you said, man, I'm a grinder. Yeah. The next year we did 6. The next year we did 10. The next year we did 25. The next year we did 30. And up until COVID, we're doing 25 to 35 a year. And other than my good friends at Netflix, nobody does that. And we are the only non-public company doing that at all, at volume, at scale. I mean, I'm not aware of another private company that specs out even 2 a year.
That's crazy to me, because I feel like if that's the case, and you must be so busy, on a daily basis with managing stuff like that. How do you carve the time to say, now I'm going to pitch? By the way, we're going to tell everybody that that's bourbon in that cup too. How do you pitch?
I wish.
The toys. How do you make a time and carve out a niche for the show on toys when you're this guy? Was that a hard thing, like, to pivot and say, I know you guys know me as the comedy guy, but this is what I'm going to do now? And that was my first question I wrote down, is somebody who has the ability to adapt and be successful in 2, 3, 4 different areas. That's fascinating. And that's what I think people should know about you, is that it's an ethic. It's a set of traits. It's characteristics that allows you to go from here to here to here to here and still be successful. That's fascinating to me.
So I'm going to break your question into 2 parts. The first part, believe it or not, no one's ever asked me that before. And I don't know if you saw, but I really laughed because it cracks me up. Because it's like, I own my company, man. Yeah. Like, I built it from nothing. I can do what I want. Yeah. So if I got 8 minutes here or 3 hours here or a weekend there, I can fill it with whatever I want. So that's really what it was. You can't be making stand-up specials 24/7. You might be able to do it 25/6, but there's still going to be some free time. So that's the first part. The second part, dude, I was the luckiest motherfucker ever. I mean, dude, wait till you hear this. So there was a guy, his name was Devin. I don't give last names because then everyone gets mad at me and they get emails. There was a guy at Netflix named Devin. And Devin had a very interesting job. His job was to acquire stand-up specials that had already been made and aired elsewhere. So because of how many specials I produced and how long I'd been doing this, he and I were, the people at Netflix told him, hey, you got to know Brian. So me and this guy, Devin, started doing business. We're doing business, and when you do business, you get lunch, then you get dinner, then you get drinks. And all of a sudden, his family, his wife and 2 kids come to my house. They meet my wife and kids, and yada, yada, yada. So that's lucky break number 1. Because my problem was, as you pointed out accurately, I was typecast as a comedy producer. So him coming to my house was an important variable because he saw my collection. So in his brain, the way our business works, what that means to him, as it will happen 2 years later, I am an expert And that's very important, to be an expert, because nobody wants a producer who doesn't know what the fuck they're producing. So that's lucky break number 1. Lucky break number 2, the Netflix Corporation says, you know what? We need to start making reality shows. We need to start doing unscripted. Let's ask Devin to do that. So Devin gets taken from this really small niche of stand-up comedy, and he did other things too, of course, and he was basically asked with starting up Netflix's unscripted business. So here's my buddy, who I'm literally friends with. His family's been in my house, all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, I have a great show about toys. You're trying to make shows. I got a show. I've been trying to sell this for 7 years. You got to make my show. And he basically ignored me for 6 months, to the point where I call him up about something. He'd be like, dude, I'm happy to talk to you. This better not be about that toy thing. That was about 6 months. Then one day, and it was a weekend, and for a variety of reasons, I remember it was a weekend, because up until lovely COVID, I never was taking notes on a weekend from an executive. He says to me out of nowhere, I mean, I thought the show was dead. He goes, dude, if we did a show about toys, here's how we would do it. And I'm frantically writing down everything he's saying. Then, over the next month, I shoot a sales tape. I edit a sales tape. It's about 5 minutes long, based on what I wanted to do and his notes on what I wanted to do. Then I sent him the tape, and he was like, okay, send me a treatment breaking down all the episodes. We sent him a treatment that I would say conservatively was 80 pages long. He's like, this is great, dude. I'd like it to be under 10. So we cut it down to 10, and that's what got it greenlit.
Amazing. So it's pretty serendipitous in that regard.
Two major pieces of luck.
Yeah, that's amazing, dude. Well, Brian, I can't thank you enough. I didn't even get the chance to talk to you about movies that made us. I hope there's an Evil Dead 2 eventually episode that like 5 of us want to watch. But man, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for taking the time. It's a real honor, and I don't know what else to say. You're amazing. Tell people what they should be watching if they're watching this. Where do you want them to go and check your stuff out?
I mean, the thing we're doing now, a toy store near you. That's on Amazon Prime and YouTube, and it's about to be a lot of other places. We just did a show that I love on BET Plus called All the Way Black that I'm very proud of. We have a show that just got announced yesterday with Zac Efron. It's called Down to Earth with Zac Efron. That is also on Netflix. And we have a show coming out later this year that we're doing with The Rock called Behind the Attraction, and that is for Disney Plus. And that's all about your favorite rides and stuff like that at Disney parks. So
I think I'm super most excited for that one of all of them, man. Anything with The Rock, got my heart. All right,
let me know what you think.
For sure, man. Oh man, that guy's brilliant. I'm so grateful. Shout out again, Brian Adams, for that hookup, and I hope we did it justice. Guys, don't forget to click like and subscribe on the video. We have a ton of more content coming out. You know, we got live streams, we got more interviews, some more process videos, and I really think you're going to be super into what the show is evolving into as time goes on. So share this, share it. If you like it, share it with somebody else who might like it. I know these interviews are a little longer format, but it's kind of like a cool thing to put in the background and just work on stuff and whatever. Anyway, thank you guys so much. I love you. Appreciate you. See you next time.